Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to dress up these rocker covers. Over here I've got the passenger side one, which usually has the oil cap in it. So what I've gone and done already off screen is I've removed the spark plug seals, so they've come out. All you really need to do with these, if they're a bit stuck, is just get a hammer on the inner side of the seal and tap them out. This has already been cleaned out by my helper, and this channel is nice and clean. All the gunk that was on there, that's mostly gone. This is just really staining. You don't really need to worry about that. If it's in this quality, that's 100% fine. The only thing I'm going to do now is just get rid of these little seals here. They can just be gotten rid of because they are a bit old and brittle. Now, when it comes to buying a new set of gaskets, you're going to want to get yourself at least a decent quality kit that comes with everything. As you can see with this one, I've got all the new little stoppers that go in the sides there. I've even got 2 O-rings for my oil cap, because that ring there, it's gone a bit off and expanded, and it's very hard to, it's a bit hard to get in there and get out. So I'm going to replace that. I've got the new spark plug seals. Just be careful when you install these, because these surfaces like to tear. Holden recommends you using a special tool, but you don't really need that. All you really need to do is just get a little tiny smear of oil on this surface and they should go right on. I'll put those on. And then also, this is a good quality gasket like that. Make sure it meets or exceeds the OEM specs, and make sure you fit that in properly. Yeah, that's pretty much all you need. So when you're choosing a gasket kit, don't cheap out and go for one that's 20 bucks that doesn't come with all the fittings and is probably going to start leaking after about a month or two. Get yourself one that's really good quality, and you won't have to do this again for a while. Also, making sure that you've cleaned out your PCV ports, especially on this rocker cover here. What I've done to mine is just I've drilled that out just a little bit extra, because they always block up. And if you look up through there, you can see I've made those holes a lot bigger. You can see that that hole's much bigger. I've drilled that out just a mil or two. That's going to make the engine breathe easier. It's going to stop it from blocking up, and it's going to save your timing chains in the long run. So yeah, I'm going to get to work on that. Okay, so I've cleaned all that up and taken all those little seals out. So first order of business is getting in these little spark plug seals. Now, the way they go in is with this surface facing inside the engine. So this surface here is going to be facing outside when that's back together. So what we're going to do, making sure that they're in the right way, these should just press in. Now, just to make the job a little bit easier, we're just going to use a little tiny bit of silicone lubricant just on the outside, just to make that nice and slippery. And that should just press in just with your hands. It's going to be a little bit tough because they are nice and tight, but just get that started. Now, what we can do if we need it, just gently with a just a mallet, not a hard hammer, and that is pretty much in where we need it. Just going to give that another little press just to make sure that's in flush, and that looks pretty good. So we're just going to do the same thing. I might actually just spray it here with some silicone, and once again I'll get that started. Whoops. Just by hand. Just tap that in with my mallet. If it wants to go in straight, this one. So what this hammer here is called, it's a dead blow hammer. So it's just got a little bit of a weight inside, so it's not going to be a hard hit, it's just going to be a nice firm push when you hit whatever you're hitting. So once again, just check that. There's no damage, that's centered, so that's good. And just a little bit more spray on this one. And that's going to go in, should go in nicely. Just wipe off a bit of the excess, that's a bit too much. Once again, just in with your hands first of all, and then just on this particular one, because I do have this little plastic part there, I'm just going to support it with my hand. Just move that there. That's in nicely. Just once again, just check them all with your finger, make sure they're all flush, and just check them for concentricity in there. Those are all good. I'll swap off that extra silicone spray that's come out of there. Okay, now second order of business, and just making sure we are using the left hand side of these. We're going to open that up with our sharp tool. And we're just going to try and get out all these little little rubber seals, and these little dudes, they just press in there. They're pretty loose, so just check what's the right one. Yeah, they're pretty loose, but they should be right. Tell you what, I might put those in when I install this, just because they might fall out. So I'll put this new O-ring on. Just push that over there. Just get my screwdriver in there and just work it around. Come on. Just making sure that it's in that second portion there. As you can see, that's nice and loose. That should do a bit of a better job sealing that, and it does. That's nice. Okay, so third and final order of business on this. Just going to flip that over again. Just going to pull out this main gasket here, and first thing I'm going to do is just check to see which side goes where. It's this side that goes on, and I'm just going to make sure that's nice and tight, and I'm just going to fit that in there just like that. This is looking good, it's a perfect fit. I suspect that those little rubber stoppers that go in the bolt holes are loose for the purpose of expanding under pressure when you put them in. So they look pretty good. This is fitting perfectly. That other O-ring was fitting perfectly, so I'm assuming that's the manufacturer's reasoning behind that. That looks like it's stretched a little bit. And just to reiterate, just to make sure that you clean out this passage here, because there's nothing worse than going to all this trouble, cleaning it out, putting a new gasket in, only for there to be a tiny little bit of garbage stuck in there and it just leaks and leaks. There's no point to doing that. You don't want to have to put all this together and start it up and then only to find out that you've not fixed the problem. So just keep it clean and make it work the first time. Push that in. Push that in there. Now I'm just going to run my finger along this just to make sure everything's in where it belongs. And that looks pretty good. Yeah, that's not bad at all. Okay, that's one down, one to go. Okay, so now that all these seals are in, what I'm just going to do, as Holden instructs, I'm just going to lubricate this little surface here, this little chamfered surface, with a little bit of oil. Now that's the same oil that I'm going to be using in the engine. It's always a smart move to do that. I'm just going to rub that on with my finger. Now, you can stick your finger in the bottle, but what I usually like to do is just get the bottle, turn it upside down, and now when I take off the lid, there's a little bit in there. So I can just use that, just like that. So I'm just going to lubricate those surfaces just so they're not tempted to tear on me. And then that means I don't really have to go out and find a special Holden tool and pay for that and go to the trouble every single time I need to do this job. Because, you know, I'm not really planning to do this every couple of days, so there's no real point of me getting a specialist Holden tool. So I'm just going to lubricate those. Now, just get a little bit more oil in that lid. This oil here is a 10W40 full synthetic oil. That's the one that I prefer to use on my modern V6 and V8 engines. It's just runs a little bit smoother, I find. Most people will put a 5W30 or 5W40. That works just as well. Personally, for me, I sometimes spend a little bit more time at higher throttle and higher load, so I just prefer to have that tiny bit of extra protection. So that's really all you need to do there. You don't really need to get any oil on these surfaces because they're going to seal up anyway. They'll get oil splashing on them. They're fine. Alright, so these are just about ready to be mounted back where they belong on the car. Okay, so before you're putting your rocker cover back on, what you're going to want to do is put some Rtv sealant, which is this stuff, just on this little gap here. That's going to stop any oil finding its way out through that gap. Also, there's another gap matching down here, which you're also going to put a tiny bit of RTV on. And for me, I'm also going to put a tiny little bit of RTV just on these surfaces just here. So I'll just go ahead and do that. Now you don't need a ton, just a tiny bead will do it. That's plenty. Just going to put some down here as well. Just because you don't want to have any oil leaking because you've forgotten to do that. Now I'll also go put a tiny dot just here and here, because this isn't a BMW engine at all, but BMW does recommend putting a tiny amount of Rtv sealant on those surfaces on their engines, and if it's good enough for BMW, it's good enough for me. I'll just smooth that down. That's why I'm wearing this glove. Smooth that down a little bit as well. Now you don't want to put any more than that because you want to be able to take this rocker cover off in the future. Now I'm only smoothing that down there because it's technically not supposed to be there, so I don't want to have an enormous bead where it shouldn't be. But these here and here, you don't want to touch those. You want to let your rocker cover squash that and smooth that out. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, with a little bit of care and a little bit of good luck, we're just going to put this back where it belongs. So I'm just going to move those out of the way, and I'm going to move this out of the way, and carefully making sure there's nothing underneath it. I'm just going to gently push that over the seals. Boom! And that is on. Just going to make 100% sure. I'm just going to feel around there, around the back, around the sides. Okay, that's on. That's pretty much all there is to it. So now what's going to have happened is this joint that's here, that Rtv sealant's going to have squashed, sealed up that joint, so oil's not going to want to come out there or the other side. And it's pretty much going to be self-locating because these seals are going to want to center on your spark plug holes here, and these little circular bits here where the camshafts go, they're going to self-locate as well. So everything else should be pretty much in place. You can't really go wrong with these ones. Also, left and right are different shapes, so you can't mix them up, as long as you remember as well your cap goes on that side. And yeah, the biggest thing you want to do is just make sure that you haven't forced any of these seals over the top there, because they do have a tendency to tear, but seeing as we have lubricated them, they've just slid straight on. Just checking them, and they don't seem to have been out of shape or anything, so that looks pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is get my left hand bag of parts, and just put all these little guys where they live. And then once I've done that, I'm just going to quickly consult my manual and check the torque and put these little put the screws back in that I've put in that little piece of cardboard near the beginning of this video. So that's pretty much all there is to it. And of course this has gone in a lot easier than it's come out, because I have managed to take that central lower intake plenum off. So by all accounts, we should just have enough for these little guys to go back where they belong. One goes under there. And there should be two on the back here, one of them one goes there, behind this little fuel line. It's a bit tricky to put him there, but that's in place. You can't see it. Just gotta be a bit careful so it doesn't fall. And then finally, this one goes in the bottom corner under this electrical connector. Okay, so they're all in. All I'm going to do now is get my bolts, put them in just finger tight, and then get my torque wrench. So now if we go back to my little piece of cardboard that I've put all my bolts in, as you can see I've got my passenger side bolts there. They correspond exactly. So I'm just going to go one by one and put these back in. I'm just going to put them in just a couple of threads so they don't come out. But yeah, I'm not going to tighten these down just yet, just because I want to make sure everything's perfectly lined up, and I'm not going to cross thread anything or torque my bolts down wrong, because I don't want to warp anything either. It is an aluminium head. I'm just going to make sure I put them all in the correct spot as well. And I was right, as I am putting these in, these are tightening up and sealing. As you can see now, I can't get that out. So just finger tight, resist the temptation to use a electric driver to put these in, because if you cross thread these, it's a pain. These are only small bolts anyway. Just a couple of threads just to make sure everything's located. And drawing that little diagram before, it's just helped me remember where everything goes, so I'm not putting bolts in the wrong spot. Now these all are exactly the same bolt, but it's always a good idea to put them back where you found them, just in case. Just in case one of them has a bit of a weird thread from the factory, and it's made it to a similarly weird thread in the bolt hole. This is a bit tricky because that's in the way now, but just going to lift that out of the way. That's easy to get to. Just going to put him in a few turns. It's not going to come out. Now, when you're putting bolts in like this, it's always a good idea to try and put them in a circle. However, when you're tightening them down, you're of course going to want to have your cross method of torquing bolts. So I'm just going to put these in just a few turns to start off with, and once they're started, you can tighten them down whichever way you want. So for me, I'm probably just going to end up using my little ratchet. Won't take too long, I don't mind. It'll only take me a couple of minutes. Okay, and that is the last bolt in place there, just behind the oil filter housing just in there. All good. Okay, so what you might want to do just to speed up the process of putting these back on is just use a little little drill like this. This is just a little electric screwdriver. Just has a little adapter on it. That's a 3/8 adapter. That just goes straight onto that, and then you just put your little 10mm on that. Now what we're going to do with this is put that on its lowest setting. We don't want to be tightening the screws with this actual driver, we just want to be screwing them down, just so we don't have to muck around too much with the torque wrench, because the torque wrench is bulky. You don't want to be sitting there for half an hour tightening them down with that. So now what we're going to do is, just because this is on its lowest setting, it's got a little clutch in it that'll stop as soon as these bottom out. And at the same time with this, you don't really need to be worried too much about going in a crisscross motion. This will do just wherever. You're not really torquing anything down. Just these back few bolts here, you can't really get to them, so all you're going to want to do there is just get yourself a little spanner, whatever fits. And really all you're going to be doing is just tightening these down until they stop. And of course I'm not going from the end of the spanner here, just the very top of it. So when it stops, it'll stop. I'm not going to be actually torquing anything down. It's just going to be basically just bottoming out on that rubber seal that I've put in, and I'll torque it from there with my torque wrench. Okay, so final thing you're going to want to do is just use your torque wrench to torque down all these little bolts, of course in the crisscross pattern, just to make sure you're not going to warp anything or over tighten anything. Now the specifications provided by Holden are that these are all 10 Newton meters, which is not much. So what I'm just going to do for my own peace of mind is do 12 Newton meters on the torque wrench. Not too much more, it won't strip them out, it's just going to give me a little bit of extra tightness. And I'll start with this one. Long throws of my torque wrench, stabilizing it at the top, holding it onto it at the end, and okay, so you heard that click twice. So now I'm just going to go across to this one on the bottom. And that's it. That's clicked. So now I'm going to go across to this one. That's tight. Yep, down to this one here. It's a bit weird to do because they have not an even amount of bolts on them, but at the same time this is just your plastic cover, it's not really going to warp. So I'm just going to come and do this one, and then I'm going to do all the ones in the back, and then I'll do these around the front. Okay, do this one in the back corner here. This one, yep. Beautiful. Now this one in the back here is a little bit tricky, but we can still fit our torque wrench in there, which is good. It just goes a little bit under this little AC pipe. Yep, that's 12 Newton meters. And I'll just do this one in the back. That's 12. Now I'll just do this one here in the bottom. Now, of course, if this was the actual cylinder head itself, I would be taking a lot more care to be doing these a lot more evenly, but there goes a car not as cool as the Adventra. Yeah, if this was a cylinder head or a crankshaft or timing chain cover, I would be taking a lot more care, but it's just plastic. You don't really need to worry about warping it. It's got a really nice thick gasket going on underneath that. And that's all of them. So now we can just go around, just check them all. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. Be quiet. A lot of them. And now all I'll do is the exact same thing on this head. Okay, so now that I've done both sides of the rocker covers, that's one major part of this this job complete. So the next thing I'm going to have to do is just clean up just a little bit more those interior surfaces there. For the intake plenum, so I'm going to be focusing on these surfaces themselves just with a little bit of sandpaper, and also both upper and lower surfaces of the lower intake plenum, and then from there the upper intake plenum. That's just going to be cleaned up a little bit more, and everything can be put back together. But before I do that, I will be installing my new spark plugs and my new coil packs. Okay, so what we've done off camera since the last segment is I've just put back all the electrical connectors back to where they belong. So I've plugged in all the little clips over here and over here. I've clipped this big side piece back into place. I've connected the NOx sensor, I've connected the earth. I've put back in that huge 15mm bolt that holds that back piece in. Everything else except for the fuel line assembly in terms of electronics is back in place. And back over here I've made 100% sure that those two hoses are tight and back where they belong. So what I've just done now is put the spark plugs in, and just to give you some context, I'll come over here and we've got the old and new spark plugs right next to each other, and as you can see, the one on the right is a lot worse for wear. There's barely any defined point to it left. The one on the left here is brand new, the exact same type spark plug, pre-gapped, and you can see there's a much more well-defined tip on that. It's nice and shiny, there's no cracks in the insulation, everything's nice and brand new. So what we'll do now is we'll just put that into the car real quick. So we'll grab our new one, just under the lights, do a visual inspection, just make sure there's no obvious cracks. And what we've got here is our spark plug socket on a screwdriver, and just gently we'll put that into the tube and just start it by hand, not too crazy. And we don't want to use any power tools or any really big wrenches to put this in, just because if we have missed the thread, we want to know about that straight away. And so then just until it stops, and that's it. That spark plug tool comes out, and that's our spark plugs in the car. Now, just to finish off the spark plug installation, all we've just done is transferred our spark plug socket and uni joint over to the torque wrench, and we've set that to 20 Newton meters, which is as Holden recommends for Alloytec spark plugs. Now all we're going to do, quite simply, is just hook that onto each spark plug, and that's all you need. Just hook it on and just straight to 20 Newton meters. And we'll do that for all 6 spark plugs. Now, just something to take note of, these particular spark plugs don't have a crush washer or anything on them, so you're not going to have a lot of travel from when they go tight by hand to when they actually click like that. And just make sure you're using that torque wrench just so you're not tempted to over tighten them. Finally, we're going to install the coil packs on the car. So first things first, here we have our new coils. I've supplied these from Mace. They're actually a really good price, and I'm keen to see if they do the job. And they do have a warranty on them, 100,000 Ks. So for their price point, I paid $170 for these. These look pretty good. That's a set of 6, and yeah, we'll install those. These are meet or exceed OEM specifications as well. Don't put anything in your car that doesn't. So yeah, installation should be pretty easy. Just the opposite of taking them out, which is line them up in your spark plug tubes. Make sure they're firmly on top of the spark plug, and push them down like that so they seal. And then this bolt should, with a little bit of finesse, find its home pretty quickly. Just like that. And then we're just going to use our 10mm just to nip that up. You can use a torque wrench on that if you want to, but it's not really necessary. Just until it's tightened, and maybe an 1/8 of a turn, if that. And then of course, lead just plugs back in and pushes in. not like that. And that's it, and that won't come off now. And that's all there is to it. Now you repeat that exact process for all of these. 6 just have a slightly different step. Okay, so from earlier on in the video you might remember that the spark plug coil pack number 6 actually had a big piece of foam on the back, which was to prevent anything rubbing on it and possibly damaging. Now the solution to that is all you really need to do is peel that piece of foam off the old one and just stick it straight onto the new one. In this case it just came straight off and went straight back on. So no harm, no foul there. And that's easy. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is put back the lower intake plenum. So first things first, we've got our new lower gasket right here. And on the top surface it's going to have these big wide bits here, and on the bottom it's going to have little spikes. Now quite simply, those spikes are going to interface with this and this hole here. So all we really need to do with that is just drop that in, and as you can see that's not going to move of its own accord. Now I've already cleaned off these lower surfaces, so there's going to be absolutely no gunk, and I've done the exact same to both surfaces of the lower intake plenum. So I'm going to go get that right now and put that where it belongs. So as you can see, both sides of that are pretty clean, so that's going to be a nice clean surface for our gaskets to sit on. So now I'll just put that back. This should self-locate, just like that. Now we're going to get our bolts. And as Holden recommends, we're just going to add a tiny little dot of thread locker just to the ends of both of these. Oops, that's a bit much. And so this first one here is just going to go down into that hole. You might need to jiggle it around just a little. And that's going in nicely. I'm just going to wind that in and then just stop as soon as it just nips up in that hole. So as you can see, it's just starting to get a little bit tight, and that's stopped. That's only finger tight. And so now do the exact same with this other bolt right here. And this one goes And now, finally, we've just got that torque wrench set to 23 Newton meters. So we'll just torque those up. Where's that last one? Just check them. And that's all there is to it. So now, before we do anything, we can get this here, plug that back where it goes, it just pops on there. We're just going to push these connectors back on. It's got a bit of movement in it for some reason. And that just sits there like that. This, of course, used to clip in like that, but it's not really going to go anywhere, so I'll just leave that alone. This plug plugs in there. Just make sure that doesn't go. This, of course, screws down once we have the inlet manifold back in. And just take that fuel line out from there, and this should just click. That's not coming off. I'll just put this on. And that's it, that's your fuel line. Your fuel injector's connected. Just quickly check all those, make sure they're all in. That's all good. Okay, and that's your lower intake plenum connected. Alright now, so the last step to actually refitting the manifold is just putting on these two upper gaskets. Now to locate these correctly, you'll notice on the backs they've got this little nub and then a couple of holes. And the way that they get located, I'll start with the driver's side, is the little nub goes into this hole in the back, and this hole actually interfaces with this little nub here, this little metal spike. And so quite simply, line up that bottom little nub and let that end fall on the spike, and that's correctly located. That's not really going to go anywhere that it shouldn't. So now the exact same deal with this other side, only difference, let's take that off because it's broken, is that's going to be the other way round now. So this little nub over there lines up, that goes on, and that just quite simply falls into place. And so as you can see, they've got little bolt holes drilled into them for your head studs or for your manifold studs, and then all you have to do now is put the manifold on. I'll go grab that now. So once again, I've just machined those lower surfaces with a just some fine sandpaper. Alright, This is going to be a little bit more tricky to mount just because it is so large, but it'll only go in the one way. Because that will interface with those little spikes as well. It's just a matter of lining them up. Something's preventing that from going in. I do believe that that's on. It's a little bit unbalanced just because of those different sized and spaced ports. But if we look down the holes, looking pretty good. I'll just feed one of the bolts through just as a test. Yep, as you can see, that's it, that's threading. So I'll put this one in back, and if I turn it a couple of times, it's being a bit tricky, but that's going in too. Try this one. That's going too. Fantastic. Alright, so we've torqued down all those bolts, pretty much the same procedure as torquing up the lower intake plenum. All I've done is put the bolts in, located the upper manifold, put a tiny little bit of thread locker on those, just some medium strength. I don't want to make them impossibly tight. And that's it, they're all good now. I've plugged up all the little pipes and every little electrical connector that I can find. Just out of shot, I also connected up the throttle body. So now what we're going to do is connect the Pcv system back to the car. Very, very important part. Now, in very short time, I will actually be upgrading this system to be running a pair of catch cans. But before I do that, I need to be driving the car, so I'll put it back the way it's meant to be. I will be using these little dooblewackies, which are the standard little plastic part that Holden supplies for the car. Pretty much how you install those. They just go in there and just firmly push those in where they belong until they're sitting pretty much flush. Give them a little wiggle. That's as far as it needs to be. There's a tiny little seal that ends up sitting about there, and that just supplies your PCV exhaust gases. So I'm just going to refit this driver's side PCV assembly. Now, of course, to take this off, it was just moving this little clip here. So to put it back on, it's just a straight push down onto the actual board itself, which is why I didn't drill it too big, because I did want to be able to just connect it back the way it's supposed to go. It's a little bit tricky to get in there, but otherwise not that hard. It's not that big a job. Okay. Because what you're trying to go for is getting that lower piece just onto the pipe there. A bit tight. That's it, that's snapped in place. This bit just sort of squeezes in out there. That's not exactly correct, but for my purposes that's fine. There's a little holder on the back here I'm trying to get it plugged into, but it's a bit out of the way. Either way, these just fit onto the engine like that. And that will do nicely. We'll just leave it like that for the time being. It's a little bit tight in there, but that should do the trick. Now, this side, I do believe something like that. So we'll swivel that forward, plug that in. And that just sits pretty much like that from memory. That's right. Just got to jiggle it a bit. It should sit about there. Okay. All right. So now we're going to refit the intake tubing. One thing I have done is this particular ring here, that was a little bit stripped down and it wasn't quite holding onto the throttle body as much as I want to, and it was causing a tiny bit of a vacuum leak. So what I've done is I've just straight up replaced that with a new part. Now what I'm going to do is I'll line up this one, which I believe lines up just like that. There's a little clip there, and I'll just fit this on. That's pretty simple. If you've gotten this far, you'll be able to do this without much instruction. I'll just line that up, push that over, and put that on. If it's exceptionally tight, you could just put a little bit of silicone spray to help put that on, but in this case it was pretty clean. There's nothing really wrong with it. And just keep in mind I'm going to be doing this by hand, no power tools. Power tools are the easiest way to ruin these. And just pretty much until it stops, finger tight, and then just a quarter turn. You don't want too much torque on these. Once again, same deal here, just until it stops. So that's tight about there. Just a little bit. No, that's super tight. That's not going anywhere. You can see the whole engine's moving if I do that. So that's super strong. And of course, don't forget, it's easy to put your PCV hose back where it belongs. Alright. Alright, we are in the end game now. So, just a little bit of housekeeping. I have removed this fuel fuse. So I'm just going to quickly check, make sure I'm putting it in the right spot. And let's see, fuel pump is the 15 amp in the back. So I'll just put him in, just make sure they're all in nice and tight. There's nothing there that's going to launch out. Put that on. And lock him into place. Okay, almost there. Gonna take these bolts off very quickly. Or nuts rather. Okay, and we're going to put this cross brace back in. So I'll just line that up. It's going to be a little bit difficult to get in. These are tough to get in because the cars are so heavy. Oh man. Yeah, so it looks like the easiest way to get this back in, because it does have a little bit of a springiness to it that keeps these two towers apart. So I think the easiest way to do it is to get some kind of soft tool in there just to bend this up just a little bit, and then that should go right down. This was a 13. Let's see if I can find that. There it is. 10 mil. There it is. It's important with these bigger cars to make sure you put these cross braces in, because it wildly affects your handling to not have them in. This Adventra is pushing 2 tons, so it's a good 300 to 500 kilos heavier than the stock Commodore. So vital to put these in. Okay. Alright, I couldn't find the actual torque spec, so cases like this, I like to give it the benefit of the doubt. We'll go about 50 newton meters. It's only a small bolt, but you want that to be nice and tight. Just to make 100% sure, we'll go up to 60. Alright, so I've just connected the battery and we are ready to start. So one thing I'm just going to go through is, because we've drained the fuel pressure out of this, we are just going to cycle that key on a few times, just for maybe 5 seconds each time, on then off. We'll do that about 3 times just to get some fuel pressure up, and then we'll start the engine. Keep in mind, this was on loosely, so all we're going to do is just turn the motor over just to make sure we've got fuel in there. There is still a lot of coolant in there, but we will just screw that down tightly and then we'll bleed out the system in a second. So let's go do that. Either way, I'm going to be dumping this board soon anyway, so... Okay, so as you can see, the engine's now running. It's purring like a kitten. Those new coil packs are doing absolute wonders. They sound fantastic. The engine also seems to be breathing a lot more easier. We had a little bit of trouble starting it up just because I had a little bit of Subaru upper engine cleaner in those cylinders. I think that was the big problem. There was a little bit of foam coming out of the radiator, but I'm pretty sure that's just because it's been churned up by the water pump. I did lose a little bit of coolant, but I did drain some in. Drained some demineralized water, topped that up, and bled it out, and that seems to be running pretty good now. So I will be doing an oil change on this very soon, and I will be doing a radiator flush on this very soon, just so I know that I've got fresh fluids in the car. But apart from that, that's all done. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.